So, story time. As some of you may know, I'm a personal trainer, okay? I've been in the gym for probably about 20 years, coaching and training myself. And along the way, I have accumulated a shit ton of knowledge. And I would like to think that the bench press is something that I'm very knowledgeable with. It's one of my favorite lifts and it's one of my best lifts. So here's what happened today. I went in the gym and I was doing incline. I no longer do flat bench. Something that Jay Cutler said in one of the videos that I saw of him was a lot of the injuries that you see happen, like pec tears and all that, has always been from a flat bench. And that kind of really fucking resonated with me. And it's something that I'm scared of. So I kind of followed his advice and took the flat bench out. And I kind of exclusively do incline. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter because that is my preference and that's the way I do things. So I'm on the incline bench press. I've got about 80 kg on the bar and I'm just trying to get comfortable, right? So I am doing 10 seconds negative, a 10-second hold, and then a 10-second positive. And I'm just doing that one rep and then racking it, taking about a minute's rest, and then I'm doing it again. And I'm just doing it. I just want to get comfortable, 80 kg. I want to be able to really fully control that weight. That's just the type of training that I want to be doing. Okay? Some people are going to turn around and be like, oh, it's not great for hypertrophy and blah, mechanical tension, blah, whatever. That's just the way I want to fucking work out. Deal with it. Which actually links into this video quite well. So there's an elderly guy in the gym who has asked my advice quite a bit throughout the past couple months. And there's another guy that I've seen around the gym. He has spoken to me probably at once and he was like, oh, you one of these content guys. And that was just because I was walking around with a fucking tripod. Yes, that I'm that dickhead in the gym, but I make content for you guys, you know. I try to be out of everyone's way as best as possible and try not to be a pain in the arse. That is what it is. So I kind of know both of these people. And whilst I'm resting, I've got my music going and I see them both taking the dumbbell, holding it, and then doing like that, which is working the rotatory cuff. I'm going to see if I can find a video and plug it in right around about here.
This might be the best shoulder warm-up. Let me start again. This might be the worst way to warm up your shoulders. One of the main functions of the rotator cuff is external rotation. And therefore to train this, you would want the resistance pulling you into the opposite direction, which is internal rotation. If you understand gravity, you would see why this exercise makes no sense. The weight is acting downwards against gravity, and therefore you're basically doing an isometric hold for your biceps. To put it in perspective, doing your external rotation like that makes as much sense as training your biceps like this. One way of training or warming up your rotator cuff properly is by holding a band, keeping your elbows by your side, and then externally rotating your hands out. Alternatively, if you don't have a band, you can just use a cable. The same concept applies, just make sure that you set the cable up at elbow height.
So this is what I'm talking about, right? And as the video says, it's a pile of dog shit because gravity makes this useless. What would be a better way of doing it is getting kind of like a resistance band or the cable and doing an exercise with that, because that's actually going to give you resistance. So I seen him do it once and I was like, it is what it is. And then the second time, so I go over to the elderly guy that I know that I've spoken to more than the other guy, and I said, just a quick question. Why are you doing what you're doing? And as I've said that, the other guy comes over and he goes, rotatory cuff. And I was just like, thought so. And I was like, it's not really the best way to warm up your rotatory cuff. And I went on to explain, you know, getting a resistance band would be better and all that. And then he kind of replied and said, no, but it works. And I was like, yeah, but gravity goes down. And then he cut me off again and he was like, yeah, no, I know all that, but you know, it works for me. That there, it works for me. It's taken in two ways and both of them are valid, right? First way, I didn't ask for your advice, fuck off. Hey, listen, that's valid, right? No one asked me to go over and talk to them. Second way, genuinely, it works for them. Who am I to wag my finger? Like I said about the Jay Cutler video and me only doing the incline press. No matter what anyone says to me now, I'm still going to do the incline press because that's what I think is right. Make sense? So for me, that is the end of that conversation. And I said, fair enough. And I also apologized and I said, I'm sorry if I offended you in any which way. I meant no disrespect by that. Which is something that I do because I try to be as polite as I can. Not only because this is my profession and I understand how to approach people, but also I understand that giving unsolicited advice, I think is what it's called, is not always welcomed, and that's fair enough. I put my headphones back on and I'm just like, all right, let me get a nice song and get into the vibe, and then I'm gonna, you know, hit my weight again. I'm getting into the vibe. I'm really, you know, getting ready to go. And then I get this kind of like waving of a hand in front of my face. I turn over, pull the headphone off. And then he was like, it just really works for me to warm up my rotatory cuff. And I said, yeah, no, it's fair enough. Again, end of conversation in my opinion. So then he goes on to say, I'm sure, you know, you've had a rotatory cuff injury. No, I've not. I've not had a rotatory cuff injury because I do certain things in order to try and avoid that, which in my opinion, and it's my opinion, my professional opinion, is a lot better than the little dumbbell thing that you were doing. And don't mean that disrespectfully. I didn't say that because I didn't get the opportunity to. Because when I said no, he literally looked at me like I just smacked him in the face and was like, well, what do you mean you haven't had a rotatory cuff injury? And then again, before I can explain, he's like, well, I've been training for 30 years. And I was like, okay, that's fine, you know. And he's like, well, what have you done? So again, I'm responding to the question because again, clearly I'm the idiot here because I thought this was a conversation. And I'm always open for a conversation and a debate because at the end of the day, that's how we learn, right? I'm not closed-minded to say this is the only way. If you have a justification, justify it to me. I might see it your way, I might not, but we can still live in the same world at the same time. Anyway, so what have you done? So I'm like, well, I mean, I've been coaching for like fucking 20 years. I've replicated. And that's where he kind of cut me off. And he was like, yeah, well, you know, I've gone down to 6% body fat. I was like, congratulations, you know. And then he's kind of given this bigger dick contest. And I was like, okay, but listen, I've coached for 20 years. I've been into powerlifting, right? I've also been able to replicate strength gains as well as body transformations for thousands of fucking clients. And then he goes on to say, yeah, okay, but you know, I calorie count. Now, again, there's two ways I could take it. First way, I carry around a lot more body fat than most people. I like it. I am bigger than my guy. However, I also have a shit ton more muscle mass than this guy. Look, I'm not trying to be petty here, but in my eyes, you bringing up calorie counting could be a little dig to say, a bit of a fat fuck, aren't you? It could be. This is what's going through my head. I'm trying to play out how this is going on, not only in my head, but what's coming out my mouth. Okay. Second way, he's genuinely asking if I know how to calorie count, which is, yeah, obvious, right? So I was like, yes, of course I know how to calorie count. I get my clients to calorie count all the time. And then he's like, well, yeah, so isn't that like the basic thing for changing someone's body fat? And I'm like, I mean, it's a basic foundation principle, yeah, but there's far more nuance to it. And then he's like, and every time I'm saying something, you're saying something. And I'm like, so basically you want me to just agree with you, which is not going to happen because you're talking in absolutes, such as a lot of people online. I don't, because there is nuance to a lot of shit that we're talking about. And again, and I'm now saying this to him, I thought this was a conversation. I thought you came over here to have an understanding of maybe my approach. And then I said, you know, you came over and you said about the rotatory cuff injuries. And I said, I haven't had one. He's like, yeah. And then I'm like, but you haven't even allowed me to explain what I would do to avoid a rotatory cuff injury. And then he's like, yeah, but you didn't say anything. I'm like, but you didn't allow me to say anything. I hope by now you can kind of see how this conversation is evolving, right? And again, clearly, stupid me thinking this is a fucking conversation, not understanding that there's other things going on. And while this is happening, again, I don't know it, but people are kind of seeing what's happening. Again, this is clearly a problem with me. I'm not saying this like I'm not being genuine. This is a problem with me because at the end of the day, words are words and your reaction to words are a you problem, as in a my problem. I get that. The way I was raised and where I was raised, there were certain things that, you know, you kind of always had a level of respect. And even in debating, there's always a level of respect. And there's certain things that, if said, for me, tears down the respect and shows there's no longer any respect here. And for me, there are certain words that are a few steps away from a fight. Again, this is a me problem, right? I mean that genuinely. Because whereas someone else might hear this word and just be like, you're a dickhead, bro, go about their business. I don't, because I'm still learning to not match people's energy. That's one of my downfalls. So now he's like, shut up, man. Am I a dickhead, bro? You came over to me. You don't like what I'm saying because you just wanted me to agree with your point of view, like you're some next guru. You're not mature enough to actually have the conversation and the debate. So now you're like, oh, shut up, man. So now I'm getting a bit annoyed. I say, look, listen, maybe we need to stop this conversation because you're starting to annoy me a bit, right? And then he's like, what? No, shut up, man. And then I'm like, no, listen, don't be disrespectful. And when he said that, the elderly guy, was like, look, maybe this is one of those things where, you know, one of you need to just walk away. And yeah, it's true. So I walked away. And whilst I was walking away, obviously, he was still rabbiting on. Put my headphones on and put my head down and just fucking laughed. When I kind of scanned the area, I noticed that a lot of people were actually looking at what was happening. And then I had a few of them, which I hadn't said hello to for the day, came over. I was just like spotting me and saying what I want and whatever. And that took a lot of time, a lot of energy and a lot of patience from me to not kind of escalate that situation. Because again, I understand that there are people in the world who are going to poke and prod and try to get a reaction from you. Again, the environment that I was raised in, that poking and prodding gave you a lesson in manners. But I understand that we can't always walk through life doing that. And as much as I wanted to teach him some manners, it probably wouldn't have been the best thing. And if this was me 10 years ago, I wouldn't be able to have that conversation internally, but I did have that conversation internally. But it still left me with a lot of emotions and a lot of thinking. Anyway, finished my workout and I went over and I was talking to one of my colleagues and I explained the situation. And now he said what many people watching this video might say, which is, Fee, maybe you just need to shut your mouth. Maybe just like don't go and talk to people. But you see, really and truly, I can't do that because that would allow stupid people like this to have won. I'm not going to allow dickheads like this to change who I am within myself and my heart. Because clearly I hurt his ego or something and he wanted a reaction. But my intention of saying that doesn't really do much wasn't to belittle, wasn't to say, you dumb fuck. Because at the end of the day, I don't mince words. If you're a dumb fuck, I tell you you're a dumb fuck. But the intention was to educate and to hopefully give them a better way of doing what they were doing. Because really and truly, you doing something and then teaching it to someone else and them doing that thinking, yo, I'm warming up my rotatory cuff. And then going in and doing a bench press thinking you've warmed up your rotatory cuff when really and truly you've done absolutely fuck all to it. I'm a firm believer in karma. So if I were to see something like that or hear about that and I could have avoided that from happening, yeah, I believe that I get some bad karma for that. I also remember what it was like when I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And there were some people that were trying to help me that also didn't really know what they were doing. And in turn, I kept, injuring myself and doing certain things. That's why I started to really start to educate myself and understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and how to do things. So it's also come from a place of experience. And then end of the day, I want to help because that's my profession. I'm here to help. not charging you for anything. I just want something to be better so that you can get the best results. Clearly that wasn't taken in the best way and the positive way that I was trying to point out. But I'm not going to allow this to change who I am myself, within me. But it really fucks me off, because you're poking the bear, so to speak, but you ain't ready for what comes from poking the bear. Also, I don't understand why the level of disrespect, right? And, again, people are going to watch this video and be like, Fee, you just told you to shut up, bro. Like, you should have walked away. Yeah, I get it, okay? But at the same time, it's tiring. It's incredibly tiring to consistently try to do the right thing. Why should that guy not be called out for, doing the wrong thing, being disrespectful? These are the thought processes. And then, you getting riled up to a certain emotional state, let's say, and then not having anywhere for that to go. I'm not entirely sure what the message is for this video. I don't even think there is a message. I'm just sharing a story. But let me know. Maybe I am the dickhead. Maybe it is my fault. Maybe I need to grow more internally and whatever. And I agree, if this was me 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, that would have ended in a very, very different way. And I'm not trying to say that to big myself up and make me, oh, he's dangerous. And no, I'm not saying it in a positive way, because at the end of the day, there are repercussions for doing certain things. And I have responsibilities and I have people who are relying on me. But it still fucks me off the extent that people will go to. Right. Well, take from that whatever you'll take from that. Leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what maybe the moral of this video might be, because I don't fucking know. It's just a story time. And I'll see you on the next one, because I got a shit ton of story times.